History remembers Lake Guatavita as a tranquil crater lake tucked high in Colombia's Andes. But what if I told you it might be hiding a truth far older than recorded time? A secret involving ancient gods, golden rituals, and technology we still don't understand. A forgotten city dripping in wealth, worshipped by an entire civilization, yet feared by even the Spanish conquistadors. And perhaps, guarded by something not of this earth. This isn't just the story of El Dorado. It's the tale of mankind's obsession with gold, the great deception buried beneath a sacred lake, and the mystery that even modern science won't admit. The lake that shouldn't exist. In the eastern Andes of Colombia, nestled high in the rugged mountains where mist kisses the treetops and the wind whispers ancient songs, lies a lake. A lake so perfectly round, so unnaturally still, that the locals don't just call it sacred, they call it otherworldly. Its name is Lake Guatavita. And this lake is the birthplace of a legend that has haunted mankind for centuries, El Dorado. But the story you were told, the one about gold, greed, and Spanish conquistadors, is only the surface. The real mystery isn't what was found. It's what was hidden, what the conquistadors saw, and what they feared. Let's begin at the center of the lake. Not metaphorically. Literally. Lake Guatavita is shaped like a circle burned into the earth. It's almost too perfect. Geologists believe it may be the scar of an ancient meteor strike. The basin is steep and deep, surrounded by dense jungle and eerie silence. The Muisca people, who ruled this region long before Columbus ever dreamed of crossing the ocean, believed that something from the sky had once fallen here. And whatever it was, it never left. Each year, the Muisca performed a ritual that stunned the earliest European witnesses. Their high priest, the Zipa, would cover himself in sticky tree resin, then dust himself head to toe in powdered gold until he gleamed like the sun. As dawn broke, he would board a sacred raft and drift into the middle of the lake, surrounded by warriors, singers, and priests chanting in rhythms older than empire. And there, under the rising sun, the Zipa would leap into the waters, offering himself and treasures to the being who lived beneath. To the Muisca, gold wasn't currency. It was a bridge, a transmitter, a way to communicate with something they called Chimanagagua, the light of the universe, a god of cosmic origin. They believed that Lake Guatavita wasn't just a body of water. It was a gate. But what were they trying to reach? And what lived on the other side? The Golden One. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the early 1500s, they were already drunk with tales of gold. The Aztec Empire had fallen to Cortés. The Inca would soon follow. But here, deep in the Colombian highlands, was something different. They called him El Hombre Dorado, the Golden Man. And unlike other kings, he didn't hoard his gold. He offered it freely to a lake. To the Spanish, that wasn't piety. It was madness. Or perhaps worse, evidence. They believed the Zipa knew of a city filled with gold so vast, so unthinkable, that he could afford to toss it into a crater without blinking. And so began one of history's most obsessive quests, the hunt for El Dorado, the lost city of gold. But here's what no one tells you. They were never hunting a city. They were chasing something far more dangerous. The conquistadors raided villages, tortured priests, and burned entire settlements to the ground trying to force the truth out of the Muisca. They even attempted to drain Lake Guatavita twice. In 1545 and again in 1912, engineers tunneled into the crater's edge, lowering the water and scraping the lakebed for treasure. And yes, they found gold. Ceremonial masks. Pendants shaped like animals and deities. Statues of unidentifiable beings. But every time they neared the deepest point, something went wrong. The tunnels collapsed. Workers disappeared. A strange pressure built in the air, making even seasoned treasure hunters abandon their tools. Some claimed they heard humming. Others swore the lake spoke. What were the Muisca trying to keep hidden beneath the surface? And why were they feeding it gold? The alien god beneath the lake. It may sound like fantasy, until you realize gold isn't just valuable here on Earth. Across the galaxy, gold is one of the most prized elements in existence. It's incredibly rare, doesn't corrode, conducts electricity flawlessly, and reflects infrared radiation better than any other known material. NASA uses gold in satellites, space helmets, and even telescopic mirrors. Ancient astronaut theorists, yes, the controversial group dismissed by academia, have long argued that extraterrestrials have visited Earth not for domination, but for resources. Specifically, for gold. And if they did come, where would they land? Not in deserts, not in cities, but in high-altitude lakes, protected from view, where electromagnetic interference is natural and where civilizations already worship them as gods. Lake Guatavita fits this description eerily well. The Muisca believed their god came from the sky in fire and left a wound in the earth. They believed that gold was the only way to communicate with him, and that this god gave them knowledge, astronomy, language. In other words, a technological exchange. Now here's where it gets strange. Among the recovered artifacts from Lake Guatavita are gold figurines that do not resemble anything from known Colombian fauna. Some have elongated skulls. Others depict winged creatures. A few appear to wear helmets. But the most controversial discovery, the Tolima flyers. These are small gold objects, 2 to 3 inches long, found in nearby tombs along the Magdalena River. Archaeologists called them zoomorphic, meaning animal-like. But engineers, they called them aerodynamic, because they look like fighter jets. And in 1997, a team of German aviation experts proved it. The flyers that shouldn't fly. When Peter Belting and Algund Einboom built scale replicas of the Tolima flyers, adding nothing, subtracting nothing, they didn't expect them to do much. These were museum pieces, after all. Ancient charms. Decorations. And yet, the model flew. Not glided. Flew. With functional stabilizers, upright tail fins, and fuselages indistinguishable from modern aircraft. The design was so precise, so mathematically sound, that the only conclusion was chilling. Someone over 1,000 years ago understood aerodynamics. Not theoretically. Practically. Trial and error? Divine inspiration? Or was this knowledge given? The Muisca, the Tolima, and other neighboring tribes all described sky people. They carved spirals into rock faces. They mapped the stars with uncanny precision. They told of beings who could travel between realms using light and metal. And always, they gave them gold. Was gold not a currency, but a requirement? Fuel? Or a form of shielding, as NASA uses today? And if these gods came once, did they come again? Or never leave? The blood pact of the conquistadors. They came for gold, but they found something they couldn't understand. By the 1600s, dozens of expeditions had vanished in the dense jungles of Colombia, Ecuador, and Venezuela. One explorer named Francisco de Orellana descended the Amazon in search of El Dorado, and never returned. Gonzalo Pizarro, brother of the conqueror of the Incas, launched a massive expedition into the rainforest with over 4,000 men. Only a few hundred made it back, and none with gold. But here's what they brought instead: stories. Stories of cities carved into cliffs with golden spires. Stories of lights in the night sky. Stories of tribes who spoke of visitors not from another land, but another world. One captain recorded seeing a great flash above the jungle, followed by thunder without sound. Another claimed he encountered a pale man with a crown of flame, standing atop a ziggurat before vanishing into the sky. Were these hallucinations from fever, or glimpses into a hidden world? One account, buried in the Royal Archives of Spain, mentions a ritual cave near the Guaviare River where local shamans claimed the gods first landed. Inside were symbols burned into the walls. Not painted, not carved, burned. And at the center was a golden object shaped like a cube, impossible to lift or damage. When the Spaniards tried to remove it, the cave collapsed. Only one survivor escaped to tell the tale. He claimed the object was humming. The lost archives of the Vatican. Now we step into territory most historians won't touch. Why would the Vatican be interested in an Amazonian legend? Why would priests from Rome personally accompany expeditions into the jungle under the guise of conversion? Because they weren't there for souls. They were there for secrets. In the 1700s, a Jesuit priest named Father Ignacio Balthazar claimed he found a manuscript hidden in a Muisca temple ruin that described beings from the stars teaching man how to make fire from air and float across the sky. The document, later dubbed Codex Guatavita, was smuggled back to Europe and allegedly stored deep in the Vatican's secret archives. In 1943, A researcher named Father Crespi in Ecuador began collecting bizarre artifacts from indigenous tribes. They brought him golden tablets, plates with non-native writing, images of stars and celestial beings, machines with gears. Crespi displayed these artifacts in a small museum, until a mysterious fire destroyed most of it. Survivors of the fire claimed men in black suits had visited the museum just days before. To this day, no one knows where the remaining pieces went. But some say the Vatican retrieved them.
Why?
Because the church had always known something others had forgotten, that the stories in Genesis, in Ezekiel, and in Revelation might not be just spiritual visions, but eyewitness accounts. The revelation of Ezekiel. Let's jump to the Bible, a book often dismissed in academic archaeology but rich in strange descriptions. In the book of Ezekiel, the prophet describes a vision. I saw a wheel within a wheel, and their rims were full of eyes, and the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. What was Ezekiel trying to describe? To modern ears, it sounds like a spacecraft. A craft with rotating rings, lights, and an energy source that moved not by horse or sail, but by force of will. The Muisca, too, believed that the gods traveled in circular vessels. They spoke of eyes of the sky that glowed at night, that moved like stars and descended like fireflies. Could these ancient people have been seeing the same thing? Is it possible that ancient civilizations, separated by oceans, time, and culture, were all visited by the same presence? And if so, why were they obsessed with gold? What was gold really for? Here's the kicker. In modern physics, gold is not just rare, it's stable at the atomic level. It resists radiation. It can coat spacecraft. It reflects energy. It conducts heat. And, perhaps most fascinating of all, it doesn't oxidize. It never decays. Was gold the key not to wealth, but to power? To energy? To interstellar travel? And if so, did the Muisca know? Or did someone teach them? The return to Guatavita. In 1965, a classified Colombian military team was sent to survey Lake Guatavita for geological anomalies. What they discovered has never been fully disclosed, but leaked documents claim that radar picked up anomalous readings at the bottom of the lake inconsistent with natural formation. What does that mean? It means something down there isn't rock, or mud, or bone. It means something metallic. For decades, the Colombian government has prohibited private excavation of the lake. Any attempts to study it deeper than a few meters are denied. Requests by foreign archaeologists are quietly rejected. The lake is protected, not as a national treasure, but as a zone of ecological and cultural significance. But some believe that's just a cover. A 2003 satellite thermal scan revealed irregular heat signatures beneath the lake, similar to those found near known archaeological tunnels in Egypt and Peru. Patterns that suggest chambers, vaults, or something else. Could it be a buried craft, an alien transmitter, a temple, or the last remaining artifact of a forgotten contact between gods and men? And now, in 2025, the lake remains silent. But the legend lives. Because every civilization has a version of El Dorado. The Egyptians had gold-clad gods and sky barges. The Sumerians had sky kings and the Anunnaki. The Mayans had Quetzalcoatl, a shining being who came from the stars and taught them everything. So here's the haunting question. What if El Dorado wasn't a city? What if it was a signal? A beacon waiting to be uncovered again? And what if it's calling? The other El Dorado, and the secret civilization no one talks about. But here's the twist that turns everything upside down. What if El Dorado wasn't a single city? What if it was never meant to be found, because it was never meant to stay in one place? Hidden in the Amazon basin, in regions untouched by modern civilization, rumors persist of another city. A city that the Spanish never reached. A city that moved, evolved, or hid itself with intent. In 2001, an expedition in the remote jungle regions of southeastern Peru uncovered strange geometric patterns carved into the earth. Circles, squares, lines perfectly arranged in deliberate shapes. Archaeologists were stunned. These were not natural formations. They were earthworks, vast, planned urban spaces stretching for miles. These designs predated European contact, and they told a haunting story. El Dorado may have been part of a much older system of lost Amazonian cities, connected by rivers, hidden under centuries of vines and myths. This civilization wasn't primitive. It had agriculture, water systems, roads, and governance. But it vanished, or was erased.
Why?
Because what they may have possessed wasn't just gold, but knowledge. And if that knowledge reached the wrong hands, the balance of power would collapse. That's why some believe El Dorado wasn't a place, but a code name for a secret technology. And the Muisca. They were just one thread in a much deeper tapestry. The gold was never the prize, it was the bait. Here's the revelation that flips everything you thought you knew. Gold wasn't the treasure. It was the trail of breadcrumbs. The Zipa, covered in gold dust, shimmering in the morning light, offering treasure to the lake, wasn't worshipping a god. He was sending a message. A transmission. A signal. Think about it. Why throw gold into a lake? Why coat your body in a rare metal and bathe before a still body of water? Unless you believed the water was a portal. Ancient cultures across the world described lakes as gateways to other realms, entrances to the underworld, or the heavens, or the lands of the gods. And gold? Gold was the conductor, the bridge. Modern science shows us that water responds to electromagnetic energy. Gold conducts it. Combine the two, a golden human in a sacred lake, and you may have the original ritual for contacting something beyond the veil. Not gods, but visitors. And if that's true, if the Lake Guatavita ceremony was a form of ancient communication, then what lay beneath the water wasn't treasure. It was technology. Something ancient. Something powerful. Something no empire wanted revealed. The forbidden theory and the alien connection. This is where the story goes dark. Because once you begin to explore the idea that gold wasn't just wealth, but a substance desired by non-human intelligences, everything changes. Zacharias Sitchin proposed that the Anunnaki, a race of ancient alien beings, came to Earth not to conquer, but to mine. And what they mined was gold. Not for currency, but for atmospheric engineering, to repair the ozone layer of their dying world, Nibiru. Too far-fetched. Then explain why nearly every ancient culture placed spiritual value on gold. Why they described beings descending from the sky in chariots of fire. Why temples were lined with gold, not for beauty, but for function. Could it be that these sites, El Dorado, Paititi, Nan Madol, were not just settlements, but refueling stations? Could the lost cities of gold be relay points in a forgotten planetary network? Gold wasn't wealth. It was a power source, and the civilizations that used it were either part of a cosmic collaboration or a rebellion against it. The cover-up, why El Dorado had to stay lost. Now we confront the uncomfortable truth. Why has El Dorado never been found? Because someone, or something, doesn't want it found. In 1912, British engineer Hartley Knowles drained part of Lake Guatavita and found golden artifacts worth $20,000, a massive sum at the time. But he was shut down. Permits revoked. Access denied. Later expeditions vanished in red tape. Artifacts were lost. Files buried.
Why?
Because what lies beneath that lake might be proof of contact. Proof that rewrites the origin of civilization. Proof that gold wasn't just Earth's obsession, but the universe's currency. And if that's true, then keeping El Dorado a myth isn't just about protecting history. It's about controlling the future. The real legacy, a warning written in gold. There's one more twist. The part no one talks about. The Zipa's ceremony wasn't a celebration. It was a sacrifice, not just of gold, but of identity, of autonomy. Every offering made to the gods of the lake was a surrender to something larger, older, more powerful. And the story of El Dorado is not one of wealth found. It's a warning of what happens when you chase the wrong prize. Gold blinded the conquistadors. It lured them to madness. It tore apart cultures. It rewrote history in blood. But the Muisca knew better. They offered gold to protect what gold could never buy. What if El Dorado was inside us all along? And now we return to the most haunting possibility. What if El Dorado was never a city, but a state of being? What if the true gold was hidden in the rituals, the consciousness, the connection to a forgotten science, one that unified spirit and matter. The Muisca didn't mine. They gave. The Zipa didn't conquer. He served. Perhaps El Dorado is not lost, but buried in us. In memory. In myth. In the whispers of lakes that no longer speak. And maybe the real tragedy is that we stopped listening. The forbidden maps and the kingdom that vanished. The conquistadors weren't the only ones searching. Long after the dust of empire settled, whispers of a city beyond imagination refused to die. And some believed they had proof. In the archives of the Vatican, locked behind centuries of silence, a monk named Father Pedro del San Pedro was said to have seen it. Not the city itself, but the map. A weathered parchment given to him by a dying Incan priest. On it, winding rivers, jagged mountains, and a single golden symbol. Paititi, it said. Paititi. Not a legend. A destination. But when Father Pedro returned to Rome, the map vanished. And with it, so did his reputation. Branded a mystic, even a heretic, his warnings were buried with him. Yet the whispers remained. In the 1900s, explorers in Peru began reporting locals speaking of a jungle city hidden beyond the Madre de Dios region. A place that glowed at night. Protected by gods, they said. Cursed by others. Some went in. None came out. Then came the Father Crespi collection, a cache of metallic plates and artifacts allegedly given to an Italian missionary by indigenous people in Ecuador. The plates bore strange engravings, pyramids, flying machines, languages that weren't supposed to exist. Mainstream scholars dismissed it as a hoax. But those who saw the full collection before parts of it were destroyed or disappeared, they told a different story. One plate allegedly depicted a map of South America, with an X deep in the Amazon. Long before satellites. Long before planes. How did they know? Then came the Wajel map, a 17th century artifact found in Germany that shows a mountain range and a golden city at the edge of the jungle. The mountain, Andes. The river, Amazon. And the city, marked only with a glyph, one that doesn't match any known European symbol. But these maps never reach the public. They vanish into private collections or disappear into institutional vaults. Expeditions are denied. Access revoked. Why? Because Paititi is more than a city. It's a challenge to the entire historical narrative. What if the Amazon wasn't a savage frontier? What if it once held an empire? What if El Dorado wasn't gold to be stolen, but a truth too dangerous to be known? And that brings us to the next layer of the mystery. Not what's above the jungle, but what lies beneath it. The cities beneath the canopy. For centuries, archaeologists dismissed the idea of large civilizations in the Amazon. They believed the soil was too poor, the terrain too harsh. Indigenous cultures were seen as nomadic, scattered, unsophisticated. They were wrong. In 2022, a team using LiDAR, a laser-based scanning technology, uncovered what had been hidden for centuries. Massive geometric cities beneath the jungle canopy of Bolivia and Brazil. Not huts. Cities. With roads. Platforms. Pyramids. Canals. Entire civilizations that had been swallowed by vines and time. These were not simple villages. They were engineered. Grids of urban planning that rivaled ancient Rome in size. Some larger than Manhattan. They dated back 1,500 years or more. Long before Columbus, long before the Spanish, and far older than previously believed. Why didn't we know? Because these cities were made of earth, clay, and wood. And when the Europeans arrived, they didn't just bring swords. They brought disease. Within decades, 90% of the population vanished. The jungle took the rest. It grew over temples, roads, markets. It erased the memory of millions. But the myths remained. To the Spaniards, the survivors told of a city of gold, deep in the jungle, impossible to reach. It wasn't a lie. It was a warning. Because those cities weren't abandoned peacefully. Some show signs of sudden fire, collapse. Others are marked by burial mounds that suggest something unnatural. And some researchers believe there's even more beneath the jungle floor. Not just buildings, but energy systems, magnetic anomalies, even underground tunnels that stretch for miles. The indigenous tribes always said, the jungle remembers. But now we're remembering too. Which begs the question, why gold? Why was it everywhere, and never just about wealth? The answer may be stranger than we ever imagined. Gold, magnetism, and the anti-gravity question. Gold is soft. It's heavy. It's not ideal for tools. And yet, across every continent, every culture, every empire, gold was sacred. In Sumer, it was said the gods came from the sky to mine it. In Egypt, gold was not currency, it was divine matter, the flesh of the gods. In the Andes, the Incas didn't hoard gold. They offered it, not to men, but to the sky, to the sun, to forces unseen. And in Polynesia, thousands of miles away, the same beliefs. Gold, basalt, energy, stars. Was this all symbolic? Or was there something more? Some ancient astronaut theorists propose that gold was used to amplify energy, reflect radiation, or even stabilize atmospheric conditions. While that sounds like science fiction, there's a curious thread. Gold is the most conductive metal known. It doesn't corrode. It reflects infrared radiation. It reacts to magnetism in strange ways. And in sites like Nan Madol, a mysterious ruined city in the Pacific built on 100,000 tons of magnetic basalt, legends speak of floating stones used in construction, of priests who used chants or vibrations to move the unmovable. Sound familiar? It should. The same stories appear in the Andes, in Egypt, even in the forbidden Himalayan texts. Gold was not for kings. It was for technology, for energy, for something we no longer understand, and maybe something we were never meant to. If El Dorado held massive quantities of gold, was it just treasure? Or was it a machine? An energy grid? A power source buried beneath jungle and silence? And is that why they erased it? Because whoever finds it might also find what that gold was really for. El Dorado was never a myth. We just weren't ready for the truth. The Spanish chased a city, but the city was only a shadow. What they found wasn't just gold. It was evidence of a civilization that defied everything they believed, about history, about power, about what humans were capable of. So they destroyed it, or tried to. They took the gold, burned the records, and rewrote the past. Because the truth was too dangerous. That deep in the heart of the jungle, an ancient knowledge still sleeps. A golden city, a technological wonder, a civilization older than empire. We called it El Dorado. But maybe that was never its name. Maybe the real story was never about treasure, but about truth. A truth we're only just beginning to rediscover, through satellites, forbidden maps, oral traditions, and magnetic anomalies science still can't explain. And maybe, just maybe, the city still exists, not as a myth, but as a memory buried in earth and time, waiting for someone who won't plunder it, but understand it. If that changed the way you see El Dorado, or history itself, hit subscribe. This is the channel where the forgotten is remembered. Share this with someone who still believes the old stories were just fairy tales. And comment below. Do you think El Dorado was real? Or are we still afraid of what we might find if we actually discover it?